a celebrated fashion editor.
She was very glamorous. She was a sort of a glitzy phenomenon.
A secret love life.
She had reassured me there was no way that she could get pregnant.
And a puzzling death.
Nobody can be ruled out.
Old money, New York glamour, and fatal attraction collide. Tonight, on Power, Privilege, and Justice.
What is your emergency?
It's Krista Worthington. I don't know what happened. I think she fell down or something. I'm sure she's dead.
Police in Truro, Massachusetts, near the tip of Cape Cod, respond to the call. Local children's author Tim Arnold said he was returning a flashlight to his neighbor Krista Worthington when he stumbled upon a horrific scene.
They saw the rear door had been kicked in, he said. The deadbolt was hanging. And he walked into the home, and he made a gruesome discovery that Krista was laid out half naked on the floor.
Clinging to her body was her 2.5-year-old daughter, Ava.
And he called, and he said the baby looked up, and he went and picked her up and discovered that Krista wasn't responsive.
Tim says he couldn't find a telephone in the cottage, so he ran back through the woods to his own house to call for help.
I'm a friend, and I just was returning a flashlight to her, and I saw a light on.
The scene inside is like nothing this small-town police force has ever seen before.
It was a violent attack.
It was a very gruesome scene. There was a lot of blood.
Even for people that do this type of work for a living, looking at crime scenes, it was particularly outrageous and horrendous.
46-year-old single mother and former fashion editor Krista Worthington lies dead on her kitchen floor. She's badly bruised and beaten with a single stab wound through her chest.
With respect to the condition of the body, I think anybody analyzing the crime scene would suspect a sexual assault.
Police estimate she was killed 2 days earlier.
Krista was in that house upwards of 48 hours, and her 2-year-old infant was locked in the house with her for that period of time.
Ava is unharmed, but clearly traumatized.
Ava's fingerprints were on her mother's torso. There was a washcloth found, and Ava tried to wipe her mom down. She told police when they arrived that Mommy was dirty. She was referring to all of the blood.
After speaking with her, it was the belief that she didn't actually witness anything.
As the body is taken to the morgue, the seaside community reels in the wake of its first homicide in more than 30 years.
A young mother with a wonderful child. It's incredible.
In a place known for its rugged beauty and quaint charm, the only thing on people's minds now is murder.
It was just the sort of big city crime that people in Truro paid big bucks to escape from. When I was a boy, my own family used to summer at the Hotel Belmont in Harwich, and I still love vacationing on the Cape. It's hard to imagine this idyllic place as the setting for such a horrible crime.
How could this be? Why would anyone ever come into Truro and go to this private person's house and want to murder her?
Massachusetts State Police send crime scene technicians to scour the cottage. But the first responders created problems.
They were dealing with a crime scene that had been completely corrupted by 14 or 15 paramedics who were in and out of that house before the cops arrived. We live in a quiet little town on the tip of Cape Cod. No one knows how to investigate a murder scene out here.
Despite the contamination inside, investigators are able to recover some evidence outside the house.
There appeared to be signs of a scuffle. Personal items of Krista's, a hair barrette, her eyeglasses, socks were found outside. And then there were these marks that led up to the door as if a person had been dragged under their arms with their feet dragging on the ground.
It appears that Krista had been attacked outside her home, dragged inside, then killed.
They did see a cell phone that was on a table. They could see the number 9 on the screens, and police say that perhaps Krista was trying to dial 911 at the time that this happened to her.
She's really beaten to the point of helplessness.
Investigators don't find the murder weapon, but they do turn up a critical clue from Krista's body.
Police, they did a lot of DNA swabs and blood tests, and they soon realized that in the moments coinciding or extemporaneous with her death, Krista had had sex with somebody, and they had semen, they had DNA from there.
Based on the location of the DNA, there was I would suggest a fairly strong inference that whoever left the DNA was probably the killer.
The DNA could be an invaluable clue in identifying Krista's killer, or one of the last people to see her alive. But it won't be of any use until police can track down a suspect.
When you have a case that's unwitnessed, you start interviewing people that were close to the victim.
Certainly, everyone's upset. Just everything's changed. It must be someone somewhere that knew her.
With fewer than 2,000 people living in Truro during the winter, residents fear the killer could be right next door.
In the days after the murder, everyone kept saying, oh, I'm going to have to start locking my door. So it definitely sent sort of a ripple effect through the community.
Officials hold a press conference to calm jittery nerves.
Yes.
But police can do little to curb the fear or the media frenzy surrounding the murder.
When my phone started ringing, when reporters from really all over the country started calling me, and I thought, what's going on here? And it became clear quickly that there were tabloid, sensational elements to the story.
A week after Krista Worthington was found murdered in her Cape Cod beach house, family and friends gather for a memorial service.
It was a very somber gathering. Nobody knew exactly how to react. It was so unthinkable that this could have happened.
Friends remember a woman who'd had it all.
She was unconditionally happy. There was nothing left for her to hope for, to yearn for. She was just really unconditionally content.
By all accounts, Krista lived a charmed life.
She had a very glamorous job. She had travel. She had Paris. She had New York. She dated many different men. But Krista, you know, was always looking for something, I think, a little out of reach.
She'd moved to Truro just 4 years before her murder. It was a far cry from the French Riviera, but here, in her cottage in the dunes, she'd finally found contentment.
She loved Truro. Clearly, it occupied a central place in her heart. This was her home, her roots.
She had relatives throughout the area, and everyone in town knew her by name.
In a general way, that was their ancestral terrain. There are streets up there called Worthington, that kind of thing.
Krista grew up the only daughter of Gloria, a painter, and Toppy, a state prosecutor. They lived in the Boston suburb of Hingham, but every summer they packed up for the Cape, where their name was well known among the vacationing elite. Worthingtons had been coming to Truro for generations.
The Worthington family is one of the most important families, if not the most important family, in that area of Cape Cod, the Outer Cape.
Krista's grandfather was one of the town's largest employers and one of its biggest landowners.
The patriarch of the Worthington family, John Sr., was a major figure in the fish business, the selling of fish. And during the Depression, John bought up lots of land.
While Krista's grandfather was earning money hand over fist, her grandmother, Tiny, launched a cutting-edge clothing line hewn from real Cape Cod fishnets. Krista's love of fashion was born.
After graduating Vassar, the young journalist landed a plum job at Women's Wear Daily. Soon, she was off to Paris and the runways of Givenchy, Dior, and Yves Saint Laurent.
She was very glamorous. She was a sort of a glitzy phenomenon. She was the head of the Women's Wear Daily Bureau in Paris and knew all the designers and knew how to live well over there.
Krista was on the guest list at all the swankiest events, from fashion shows to polo matches to formal balls with European royalty.
They said Krista had the Rolodex to die for.
People who were the major fashion stars of that moment were taking her phone calls.
Freelance writing assignments took Krista to London, then on to Manhattan, where champagne continued to flow.
It was the Dynasty era, so it was like everything was sort of big and glitzy and glamorous, and there was sort of big money splashing themselves all over the place. You go to Studio 54, you know, we used to do that. It was a kicker. It was very heady.
Krista may have hobnobbed with celebrities, but she always seemed to be a free spirit. Though she had closets full of couture designs, she was most at home in jeans and thrift shop finds.
Anyone who actually knew her was much more likely to imagine her in sweatpants and a sweatshirt and her hair in a mess because she was on deadline and hadn't had time to clean herself up. She cleaned up very nicely for the parties and for business, you know, whatever. But this was not who she was.
By the time Krista was in her late 30s, life in the fast lane had lost its appeal. She yearned for a more substantial existence.
The values were wrong, but she was just really taking a second look at what was important to her, what really mattered.
She told friends what mattered was starting a family of her own.
I think there was some point where she went, oh my God, I've spent my life not taking, you know, my goal of becoming a mom seriously, and I better get on this. And she started to get somewhat frantic about it.
But the more she thought about having a child, the more she considered going it alone.
Krista did get involved in an organization called Single Mothers by Choice, and she was looking into perhaps having artificial insemination to have a baby. She even brought home little biographies of donors and tape recordings of the donors' voices.
Then she learned two things that led to her big life change. First, the doctors told her she couldn't have children. Then, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Krista returned to New England to be closer to her mother. Eventually, she moved into West Wind, the old family cottage in Truro. It soon became her permanent address.
I think she just wanted to move to the next phase, and that involved going back to the geographical area of her roots, which she loved very much. That area is a lovely area.
Truro in the off-season can be a bleak and lonely place, especially for a woman used to fabulous parties and fresh croissants. Come Labor Day, the fancy people pack up, leaving behind the trawlers, the fish, and the locals.
It's very peaceful, it's very calm, it's literally the antithesis of New York. And for the time in her life and the place that she was at, that was the place for her to be.
It was there during the summer of 1998 that Krista had an affair with a man named Tony Jacket, a local fisherman and the town's shellfish constable.
He has a reputation for loving women, and he likes women's company. And so when I heard about Tony having had a relationship with Krista, I wasn't surprised.
Miraculously, Krista became pregnant.
It was really her dreams coming true in a certain way, but dreams that she had no hope of their coming true. So it was a remarkable thing for her.
It was not a remarkable thing for Tony.
I was in a state of shock because she had reassured me there was no way that she could get pregnant. And I'm thinking oh my God, I'm in big trouble.
Krista was ecstatic about her pregnancy, but Jacket was married with 6 kids and had no intention of getting a divorce.
You talk to her acquaintances, and they say, Krista Worthington, nice girl, bad taste in men.
Krista didn't really want Tony involved in the pregnancy. She said she would take care of things and everything would be fine, and he didn't have to acknowledge things.
The arrangement seemed to work.
So as time goes on, you know, I'm thinking that maybe I don't have to tell my wife.
But after a year and a half of raising Ava alone, Krista wanted her daughter to have something more.
And, you know, at some point in time, she decides she wants to have me involved.
Jacket was forced to tell his wife about the affair and the baby.
I didn't know how it was going to play out with my wife. I was prepared that I would, you know, it would be irreparable, and that, you know, I'd have to move on.
But their marriage survived, and eventually, Ava was even welcomed into the Jacket family.
For about a year, we interacted and coalesced for the best interest of Ava, because that's what Krista wanted. So we're thinking everything's lovely, which it was. And, you know, she did want health insurance. I put her on my health insurance. And, you know, that was as far. We never went to court because she didn't want to go to court.
Investigators now wonder if Jacket harbored resentment toward Krista for all the trouble she'd put him through. And when they learn about Ava's $1 million inheritance, suspicion grows even deeper.
On the surface, it gives him a motive. The child had a large inheritance. He was the father of the child, and I think that there were some questions there.
Police question Jacket, but he strongly denies having anything to do with the murder.
Did you kill Krista?
I can't imagine anybody asking me that, and my answer is going to be, of course not. And I hadn't been anywhere near her house.
Old flames are always high on the suspect list, but Tony wasn't the only ex in the spotlight. Cops were also interested in another man with access to Krista's cottage and her bedroom.
While police continue to investigate Tony Jacket, the father of Krista Worthington's baby, another suspect emerges. As police soon learn, Tim Arnold, the man who found Krista's body and called police, had been much more than just a neighbor.
Tim Arnold is an interesting guy. He's an illustrator. He writes children's books. He lived right behind Krista, and he could walk to her house from his back porch. And when she was living here with baby Ava in the cold winter, they became friends. And soon, they became lovers.
They had dated for nearly a year after the end of Krista's affair with Tony, and even lived together in West Wind for 4 months. During that time, Arnold grew extremely close to Ava.
He's very attached to Ava. Some might say he is too attached to Ava.
But after a year, Krista ended the relationship.
He was a very, you know, needy person, I think, and she was a needy person, and at first they helped one another out, but then I think he started to suffocate her a little bit, and she asked him to leave.
Arnold was devastated.
I did spend a lot of time getting to know Tim, and I did feel he sensed a big loss when Krista dumped him.
2 writers finding love down the lane. It must have been bliss at first. When a romance is in full blossom, having your lover live next door can be awfully convenient. But when the bloom is off the rose, it can be torture. Investigators had to wonder if the stage was set for murder.
The essential fact is that Krista rejected Tim. And it was hypothesized that a scorned lover, et cetera, went into a rage, lost control, beat her and stabbed her to death.
Tim's story of finding the body also raises suspicions.
911. What is your emergency? It's Krista Worthington. I'm a friend, and I just was returning a flashlight. I'm sure she's dead.
He had mentioned a detail about Krista's murder he shouldn't have known.
He told police that she had been stabbed. At the time, the police didn't even know that. The wound wasn't visible, according to the detectives. Only the killer would have known she had been stabbed at that moment.
Digging deeper, investigators find a history of suspicious behavior.
There was a time when Krista asked him to stop coming to the house unannounced. There was suggestion that he was taking it too far and he was almost kind of stalking her.
Arnold denies killing Krista, but cops aren't convinced and go at him hard.
There were certain things that, that he said and did that caused them to be somewhat confrontational.
As police turn up the heat on Arnold, he claims it would be physically impossible for him to have committed the murder. He suffers from an unusual brain condition that leaves him weak and dizzy.
He was a little incapacitated. Krista found it's difficult at times, and they had, you know, some issues. He had told me that one time she told him that she feared that if he picked up the baby, he might drop her because of his condition.
In the week after Krista's murder, police question Arnold and Jacket repeatedly. They take DNA samples from both men, but neither is a match. Investigators will have to expand their search.
They have said they still do not know who contributed the semen to the scene.
Detectives wonder if Krista could have had a secret new boyfriend, but it doesn't seem likely.
Krista told all of her friends about any love interest in her life. Her two boyfriends that she had up there, Tony Jacket and Tim Arnold, we all knew about those guys essentially from day one. Whether I would have heard it or one of her other friends would have heard it quickly.
But maybe the killer wasn't an old flame after all. Through interviews with friends and family, investigators find trouble back on the mainland.
They discovered that Krista's father was seeing a woman who raised their interest. She was somebody who had been involved with the law before.
Years ago, Krista's dad, Toppy, had been an assistant attorney general in Massachusetts, held in high regard by his peers.
He's a man who really rose very high in his profession.
Now, the 73-year-old widower isn't quite living up to the Worthington name. Investigators learn that he's been supporting 29-year-old Beth Porter, a woman with a history of prostitution and drug charges. It had been going on for months before Krista's death.
I see him and her together every once in a while. That's all I know about them. They keep their business behind their door.
He was a sugar daddy. That's what it looks like.
The situation with Toppy and Beth Porter was certainly another twist in a situation that seemed to have a lot of interesting characters and twists and turns.
The revelation is deeply embarrassing to the Worthingtons.
Here we have this guy with all the credentials, Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Law School, attorney, has been carrying on an affair with this late 20-ish, heroin-addicted prostitute from the Boston area.
Friends tell investigators Krista had been livid about the arrangement and tried to put a stop to it.
She was absolutely beside herself that this was happening. She couldn't believe that her dad could have been involved with this woman who, first of all, was so beneath him, second of all, was so young, third of all, who she believed to be incredibly manipulative.
Krista went so far as to hire a private investigator to check out and trap the father, to show the father was incompetent and have him put away.
If Krista had succeeded with her plan, Beth Porter's money train would have come to a screeching halt.
She had told me about trying to put an end to either the relationship or at least an end to him spending money on Elizabeth Porter. And I thought, wow, there's motive here.
This case had a list of suspects worthy of an Agatha Christie novel. First, there was the philandering shellfish constable. then the disabled children's author, and now the ex-hooker with an axe to grind. The public was eating it up with a spoon, and there were plenty more chapters to come.
Investigators in the Krista Worthington murder turn up an unsavory family secret. Shortly before her death, Krista was trying to end her father's relationship with an admitted prostitute who had a history of drug problems.
It seemed to be a turn in the case. Suddenly, we have someone with a very clear motive.
Detectives head to Quincy, a tough working-class town near Boston, to question Porter and a male friend of hers, Edward Hall. Both deny any involvement in the murder.
The police spent a great deal of time investigating Porter and Hall both. And there were discussions, as reported by the police in their reports, about Toppy cutting off the money supply because Krista was pressuring him to do that.
But no arrests are made, and authorities refocus their investigation on the Truro area. Several weeks after the murder, police questioned Tony Jackett's son-in-law, Keith Amato.
He was somebody that knew Krista and was at one point invited up to use the outdoor shower. Anytime you're at the beach, you can come down and use the shower. And on that basis, he was questioned.
He was called into the police department, that he was asked a lot of questions, that the police slammed their hands on the table, and that he started sweating, and he started getting really nervous, and he realized that this was no longer a friendly conversation between he and the police.
But when his DNA doesn't match either, the investigation is back to square one. Police cast an even wider net, questioning anyone who knew Krista or ever came to her house on the Cape.
The UPS guy, any maintenance people that had done work, or handymen that had done work, the garbage person, those types of persons.
Police also make a trip to New York City to question Krista's old friends and colleagues.
They interviewed me, they interviewed my wife, they interviewed 3 or 4 other people that I know of, maybe 2 or 3 people that I know of, and probably a few others that I don't know of. I believe they came here because they were running into dead ends. They weren't solving the case.
Family and friends of Krista's posted a $25,000 reward in hopes that it would bring to light people who were reluctant to speak.
But the plan failed. As the 1-year anniversary of Krista's death passed, the money went unclaimed, and the case went as cold as Nantucket Sound in winter. And to add to the family's burdens, a custody battle was breaking out over Krista's daughter, Ava.
In her will, Krista awarded guardianship of Ava to an old friend, Amira Chase.
I have 3 sons and a daughter, and lots of friends, and so she's basically in a house full of children, and she's doing well.
But Tony Jackett, Ava's biological father, wants to raise her himself.
If anything, she one day know that we loved her enough to come here and fight for her.
But a judge denies him custody after the district attorney refuses to rule him out as a murder suspect.
Not only am I not getting custody of my daughter, but now, with all the media there, I'm the #1 suspect.
A year and a half after Krista was killed, the high-profile whodunit continues to make headlines. A book on the murder is released, and it quickly becomes a bestseller. Krista's shocking death strikes a chord with people across the country.
It's an incredibly complicated, deeply human story.
Desperate to crack the case, police consult with the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit to create a profile of the killer. The FBI tells them that based on its analysis of the crime scene, the killer is probably living among them.
The killer is someone local. It is not a stranger, it's someone who's still in the area.
Cape Cod was reeling under the pressure of its notorious unsolved murder. Ever since the Kennedys set up their summer compound in Hyannisport, the Cape has been a safe haven for the moneyed set. Now, everyone was under suspicion.
As the 3rd anniversary of Krista Worthington's murder draws near, police are convinced more than ever Krista's killer is a local man.
We are focusing our efforts in the Truro community, largely as a result of a recent analysis of the case in conjunction with the FBI. The hurdle in this investigation has been the identification of that unknown DNA profile. We feel confident that the Truro community can assist us in identifying who that person is.
So police decide to tighten the noose around Truro by launching a dragnet operation.
The DA's office wanted to get DNA samples from all of the men in Truro to see if a sample might match the DNA they found on the body.
Police descend on the main streets of Truro, asking every man they can find for cheek swabs.
They asked men at the gas station, at the, the grocery, the convenience store, at the liquor store, at the town dump to submit to a DNA test.
Some men readily comply.
They just asked for the community's help, and I'm part of the community, and I felt like I should help.
Others refuse.
Someone can make a clerical mistake, and I'll be on trial somewhere because my DNA was innocently mistaken.
More than 75 swabs are taken the first day alone. But it's a contentious strategy, and the ACLU starts complaining, especially when investigators admit they're paying close attention to how men react to their request.
If you didn't give them the DNA, they were taking down your license plate number and you were going on a special list.
The state police's little fishing expedition stirred up a storm of controversy. I mean, I know there's a murder investigation, and I probably would have complied. But can you imagine, you're in the middle of your lobster roll when a cop sizes you up, saunters over, and asks for a saliva swab?
It's common conversation everywhere by everyone. And I think what's happened is it's definitely shook up the community.
To many people in town, the investigation seems to be heading nowhere.
There was a feeling that perhaps police had bungled the case. It was kind of this desperate attempt to find who killed Krista Worthington.
And a lot of folks fear that that desperation could take the case in the wrong direction.
There was also a growing body of opinion, which in fact had been triggered by the DNA sweep, is the cops are going to frame someone. They're going to have to find someone. So fasten your seatbelts, kids, because it's coming down sooner rather than later.
Those concerns are reinforced by reports that police have been trying to coerce confessions from their initial suspects.
They put a lot of pressure on Tim Arnold to confess. Keith Amato, the son-in-law of Tony Jackett, they wanted him to confess. They called him derogatory names, he said. They accused him of having sex with men.
But police defend their interrogation methods and the DNA sweep, saying the tactic has worked before.
There was a small town in England where that was done, and ultimately that yielded the rapist in that case. And so it was something that we weren't 100% certain would work, but felt it was a step worth taking.
Little do the people of Truro know how slow things are really moving. Police have taken DNA samples from more than 100 men, but because of the logjam at the state crime lab, most are not being tested.
A lot of samples were never tested, and ultimately the DA said there is a backlog. We are understaffed, we are underfunded, and we're doing the best we can.
While CSI Cape Cod was slogging through random DNA samples at a snail's pace, the killer, it would turn out, was living right under their noses. It seemed justice in Truro was moving no faster than Saturday traffic on the Sagamore Bridge.
3 years after Krista Worthington's murder, investigators finally get the DNA match they've been waiting for.
We were up at a meeting at the State Crime Lab, and we got the news that there had in fact been a hit. He was an individual who was worked for the garbage company. The crime occurred in January of 2002. He was spoken to in April of 2002. We were all very happy. That was a very significant piece of evidence in the case.
The suspect's name is Chris McCowan. When first questioned, he told cops he barely knew who Krista was.
Christopher McCowan, who said that he had no interactions with her other than picking up her trash, maybe a wave at the door, that sort of thing. And they let him go.
2 years later, cops re-interview McCowan, and he voluntarily gave a DNA sample. But instead of being tested, the swab sat on a shelf for more than a year.
People, I believe, were stunned. Here this man was under the prosecutor's nose the whole time, and they had talked to him, and they had taken his DNA, and he's just now being linked to the murder.
People were pretty outraged about the timing of that revelation. While the swab police had been out on the DNA sweep, the real suspect had been living among them for nearly 3 years. And the more cops learned about McCowan, the more they believed they had finally found their man.
Christopher McCowan came to Cape Cod almost 10 years ago, and he moved from Florida, where he had been someone who had had a little trouble with the law. He'd done some prison time in Florida.
His rap sheet includes charges of grand theft and assault and battery. And even after he moved to the Cape in the 1990s, he was still making trouble.
He had had several girlfriends, many of whom had taken out restraining orders against him, and there were records of violent interactions between them.
Armed police raid the rundown rooming house where McCowan is living.
Last night at approximately 7:15 p.m., detectives from the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit arrested Christopher A. McCowan, age 33, for the 2002 murder of Krista A. Worthington.
Detectives interrogate McCowan for 6 hours. Initially, he sticks to his story, saying he doesn't know Krista. But when confronted with the DNA match, McCowan starts singing a different tune.
He also had told police that he had been having an affair with Krista.
He also admits to being at Krista's when she was murdered, but he denies killing her. He says a friend, Jeremy Fraser, is the real murderer. In a story rife with inconsistencies, McCowan says he and Fraser went to Krista's after a night of heavy drinking, looking for sex.
McCowan told police that Krista welcomed him into the home, him and Jeremy Fraser.
McCowan told cops he and Krista had consensual sex, but things went bad when Krista caught Fraser going through her purse and confronted him. According to McCowan, the men left the house, but Krista followed them outside.
According to police, McCowan said that Fraser turned around and punched her twice in the face, that he lost it, he snapped, you know, and that they put the boots to her, meaning that they stomped her and they beat her down. Eventually, Krista was brought into the house, and all of a sudden he saw Fraser pick up the knife and stab her.
Police investigate Jeremy Fraser, but he has an airtight alibi for the alleged time of the murder.
The only evidence that would point to Jeremy Fraser at the scene is a person who had changed his story about 9 times.
Authorities charge McCowan with first-degree murder and aggravated rape. Truro finally breathes a sigh of relief. As the case heads to trial, the story attracts international news coverage once again and sparks another book on the murder.
I have interrupted a book that I was writing, which I put on the shelf temporarily, because this has got to be done and done now.
Opening arguments begin on October 18th, 2006.
The defendant was completely indifferent to her suffering.
The prosecution presents a case to the jury that centers on two main pieces of evidence: the DNA sample and McCowan's interview with police, which they took to be a confession.
He's asked at one point in the interview, what would you say if Jeremy Frazier was someplace else at the time of the crime? And he says, then it's all, he throws his hands up in the air and says, then it's all on me.
The defense argues that McCowan had consensual sex with Krista and that racially prejudiced authorities, under pressure to solve the case, unfairly pinned the murder on him.
It's based on an assumption, a false assumption, that a Vassar-educated, 46-year-old, world-traveling, wealthy heiress could not possibly have had consensual sex with a black, uneducated, troubled garbage man. That's what it's based on.
After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury begins a rocky and racially tense deliberation process. It ends in deadlock.
Now get this. One of the jurors calls her boyfriend, who just happens to be in jail, and they discuss the media's coverage of the trial. The call is tape recorded, and when the judge finds out about it, the juror is dismissed. 2 days later, a verdict is reached.
We, the jury, unanimously return the following verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree.
McCowan is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
My thoughts really, when that verdict came in, were about Krista and Ava Worthington and the Worthington family, and able to get some resolution of the case for them.
Most people consider the Worthington murder case closed. But there are still whispers that a black man on Cape Cod was too easy a target, that someone else did the killing, and that the real story of what happened in that Truro bungalow will never be known. For Court TV, I'm Dominick Dunne.